Tundra Media presents The Mayor Helps, with the Mayor of Victoria, British Columbia, Lisa Helps. Have your say. Send your questions and comments to themayorhelps.com. They could be included in next week's
Victoria
show.
Businesses to know that we're working.
And now, here's your host, from beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, Dave Hatt.
Welcome to the 8th episode of The Mayor Helps. We're here with Lisa Helps on a bright, sunny Wednesday morning. Good morning, Mayor. How are you?
I'm good. Good morning. So
everything that's happening now, we're slowly opening in the city of Victoria business-wise. Things are I'm assuming most companies are like ours, where it's sort of 2 steps forward, half a step back, and everybody's understanding it. We feel like we're in a significantly better place than other parts of North America that maybe they don't have their own version of Dr. Bonnie Henry, so they're not in a great position as we are. But there is something that I did want to talk to you about. It's with the racial unrest that's happening in the States and in other parts of Canada, and here as well. There's been a lot of demonstrations in support of Black Lives Matter. We spoke of how we both attended the rally a couple weeks ago. I did notice that there has been to defund policing. Now, I've seen it all over North America, and my first reaction was like, yeah, right, you're going to defund the cops? Good luck with the bad guy that's trying to break into your house or trying to do something bad to you. What are you going to do then? How are you going to call it then? I did hear somebody else explain and say, no, it's not take away all their money. What the call is to divert some of the funds that are going to a police force and in turn send it to, say, mental health workers that would be able to assist the police in situations where the cops aren't trained or don't need to be showing up in the first place. And I wanted to know what your thoughts are, what City Council's thoughts are in the city of Victoria.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a really important conversation. And I agree that the simple call to defund the police sounds way simpler than it actually is to operationalize. And in terms of, Canada is different than the United States in that cities in Canada have less power and less authority and less resources. And so, constitutionally, mental health and addictions are viewed as health issues, which as they should be. And funding for health is provided by the federal and provincial government. So for local governments who are responsible for funding the police department, all we have as a revenue source are property taxes. So for every tax dollar that Canadians pay, local governments get 8 cents and senior levels of government get 92 cents. And so if we were to, we're actually working on this, so I'm going to get to I think a good answer, but if we were to simply take money away from policing and give it to, as you suggested, mental health workers, then by default, we're taking on some of the responsibility of the provincial government to provide mental health workers. And while that might seem like, oh, well, who cares whose responsibility it is, when our only source of revenue raising is property taxes, that's not a sustainable way to fund things like mental health services. So what we're looking at, in fact, it's coming to council tomorrow, is something out of Eugene, Oregon, that's been in existence for over 30 years, which is exactly as you say. There's an alternative response. If somebody's having a mental health breakdown or needs some support, the team in Eugene is called Cahoots, and I forget what it stands for. So they call the Cahoots team, and they come out and they're trained mental health workers. They know about the mental health challenges, addictions challenges, and that work happens. And sometimes the police do need to come, but in the instance of the Cahoots team, the police are not the first call when someone's having a mental health episode. And so tomorrow at City Council, we're going to be discussing this approach and asking our staff, if the motion passes, which I think it will, asking our staff to look for the 2021 budget, which is the next budget cycle, about implementing something similar in Victoria. So the discussion we're going to need to have, though, is with the police department and also with the provincial government about, what does a funding model look like? recognizing that mental health and addictions are health issues, not criminal issues, and should be funded by the provincial government, not the local government, understanding that the local government does have a responsibility for community safety on the broad scale. So I think these calls to defund the police have been a really good beginning of a conversation, and how those things are implemented community by community, I think, needs to be driven by each individual community.
Yeah, it's interesting comment, because I guess the calls to defund, although they might be a good starting point, there's certainly, without the explanation you just gave, they're, from a resident, they're scary, because when you hear, because I understand, I've spoken with a very good friend of mine locally that had their families have had firsthand negative experience, as in the husband was beaten up in his front yard. It's a black family, and by the police, and it was for a very minor, negligible infraction. So I know that we have had issues in the past with our police and the community, but the notion of defunding entirely, I don't think, I mean, it just, as you said, without the explanation, it doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Well, yeah, and I think the other thing, and this, the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd's death, which has really sparked it, has, I think, been in many ways rightly focused on police, because it was that police officer that held his knee down on George Floyd's neck, and that's absolutely horrific. That, it's just, I mean, there are really no words to describe that experience or that act of violence. I think, and the police as an institution do need to be scrutinized. Both the RCMP and Victoria Police and every police department in the country need to be scrutinized as places where systemic racism exists. Absolutely, and without question. And not only systemic racism, but it was police officers, RCMP, who went and took kids out of their homes and forced them to go to residential school. So there's kind of systemic racism. There's a history of colonization. There are all of those things that we need to look at in policing. And at the same time, I think if we focus just on police or too much on police, we let the rest of us off the hook. Because there's systemic racism in businesses, there's systemic racism in city governments, there's systemic racism in provincial and federal governments, there is systemic racism everywhere. And I think it's just too easy to stay only focused on the police. And I think, I do think the police are, it's a different institution, because they're basically an armed arm, if you will, I can't think of any better words, of the state. So certainly, and they have a lot of power. And I also think that we need to examine racism more deeply and more generally in our communities. And that's why at the city, one of our responses to the Black Lives Matter movement is we had put a Welcoming Cities task force on hold because of COVID budget issues. And we were going to look at the budget in August and think about whether we could afford to fund this. But I did some, I guess, clever calculating and pulled from every place I could find that was going to be COVID impacted. Like, for example, we're not traveling this year to go to conferences. And so we've taken our travel budget and put it to the Welcoming Cities Task Force. Anyways, the Welcoming Cities Task Force is exactly as it sounds. It's meant to create a Victoria that's welcoming and safe for all members of our community. So that's going to be getting underway pretty soon.
So just one last point about this. When you hear about instances in our city, as it relates directly to, the city of which you are mayor, when you hear about racial violence from cops perpetrated on citizens, what powers do you have to investigate that, to look into that, to answer the family that's saying, hey, you know what, my dad got the hell beat out of him in our front yard by a Victoria cop for not wearing a bike helmet, and then what are you able to do?
Well, in the province of British Columbia, and again, I think, I don't know if this is unlike other places in the States, but we have an entity called the Office of Police Complaints Commissioner, the OPCC, and that's the place that investigates those kinds of instances. It's a separate arm's length arm of the provincial government, not police affiliated and not tied to the police. And I know from, sitting on the police board that the OPCC takes these things very, very seriously. They do detailed, in-depth investigations. So to that family or to anyone else who experiences any violence at the hands of police, the OPCC website, you can go there, you put your complaint in, and an investigation happens. So that there is very strong police oversight in the province of British Columbia, where those things get investigated.
Okay. On that note, thank you. It's good to hear, when the rubber hits the road, how things are done. That's one of the ways I think we can best use this forum, is to explain to people how things actually happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's complex, and you're running your business. People are doing their daily lives. Not everybody knows the workings of the OPCC or the city hall, or so. Yeah, it's information is power, and the more information that people have, the more that they'll be able to understand, but also intervene in some of these systems that really affect people's lives.
True. Thank you so much for your time today on our episode 8, and we'll see you on the other side. Okay, take care.
Have your say. Send your questions and comments to themayorhelps.com. They could be included in next week's show.
Our next guest is Katrin Harry. She's the managing partner of Advanced Business Match. And Katrin, this is Mayor Lisa Helps of Victoria.
Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to meet you.
Hello. I'm the managing partner with the Advanced Business Match, or ABM for short. We are an online and in-person network that connects decision makers to create opportunities for business. We are a market leader in technology facilitated business development, and our network is currently comprised of about 3,000 companies and 300 communities across Canada. With proprietary software built right here by Mighty Oaks in Victoria, we are poised to go global. That's our plan. COVID-19 accelerated the development of a video feature that was already on the list, but it just moved it up on the priority list. And that allows us to very efficiently connect people virtually right now. Our online connector is a rapid and efficient way to connect decision makers that otherwise wouldn't be able to connect. Our curated network also brings people together that would otherwise never meet. We also happen to be an Indigenous company. And so, because that is our DNA, we've built a network over almost 10 years that fuses Indigenous and non-Indigenous approaches into advanced business. And so these companies, these exceptional companies, are applying Indigenous principles or traditional Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and relationship building to business. So as such, as a technology company, as one that connects online globally, we fit right into the middle of Victoria 3.0. My question is, what are some practical ways in which the city is planning to use innovative companies like ours that already are operating in the city to pursue the vision to become a future-ready, globally fluent influencer and innovator?
Amazing question. I'm so happy, A, to learn about your business, and B, that you've read Victoria 3.0. I have a hot off the press printed copy right here. So I guess the answer is you're already doing it. Companies like yours are already globally fluent. You're already influencers. And so what we need to do as a city is everything that we can to help you grow, to support your business, to connect, with other businesses that may be here that you may not be in touch with already. And really to leverage. And one of the things that we heard really clearly in the development of 3.0 is the city, as in City Hall, doesn't do a very good job of telling the story of the companies that we have here in Victoria that are already global, that are already doing all of the amazing things that you're doing. So in some ways, it's a storytelling exercise that City Hall can do. Whenever I've got an opportunity to tell those stories, I should and can. There's a lot in 3.0 about hosting and convening relevant conferences slash trade shows slash colliders slash, I don't know what the right word is, but to situate Victoria as a global center for the kind of excellence that you're talking about. So we've got a little bit of time with no one being able to actually come here, but your company probably has lots of ideas about how we can convene people on digital platforms without bringing them from all over the world. So I guess if I could just turn it back to you and ask, what do you need in order to continue to grow, and what do you think you could offer in terms of some of the things in 3.0 to help deliver the vision?
Well, definitely, like any company is interested in getting their story out. So if there's an opportunity to collaborate in terms of communications, we certainly would be interested in that. But more than that, we already have the network, and it's already happening online. So any way that we could find to include more Victoria-based businesses, we actually were planning, our events or our network operates online and then connects 6 or 7 times a year in person. One of the events, the in-person events, was planned in partnership with Songhees and Esquimalt at the Songhees Wellness Center. It was the first event that we needed to postpone. It was supposed to be March 16th to the 18th. But we certainly are committed to holding those in-person events in Victoria. And the more Victoria or regional representation we can have at those events, the better. Also, really, really important to us is that anybody that works with us changes the story about how we're talking about Indigenous business. I appreciate being in Victoria. We appreciate being in Victoria, and we see Victoria doing things. We work across the country. We have US partners. We see Victoria do things that are innovative, that are very, very hopeful, and that we're very excited to be part of. So one, we want to be more of a part of this. But then really, it's really important to change how we talk about Indigenous business. Yes, there are many businesses that require mentorship, but that's not one key feature of Indigenous business that we require mentorship. Meetings are great, quarterly or otherwise, but there are many of us that are already out there doing it, and they're kind of past the stage where we need to figure out how to do it. We just now need to connect. We also need to talk about Indigenous business as a way of doing business, not as a separate piece of the economy, because we believe at ABM, specifically in the companies that participate, that we need to find a way of doing business, period, in this country or across the world that connects with an Indigenous worldview and with an Indigenous way of looking at resources, at resource management. And I saw all of that reflected in Victoria 3.0. So we're stoked to be here. We're a Coast Salish company. We're actually, half of my crew is located in Tla'amin, north of Powell River. So we're also a regional company, and we're really looking forward to seeing what Victoria can do. And we've started a very preliminary conversation. Eventually, we'll need a center, a hub that may be in Victoria. We've started a conversation with Songhees in the very first stages, but we also see Victoria as a place where we can grow the pieces that happen in person and together as a team.
That's awesome. So the other key piece in Victoria 3.0 that is probably of interest to you is the Innovation District. That's a piece of land north of downtown, blocks and blocks and blocks. The Songhees and Esquimalt actually own 6 acres in that area. And that might be a great place for your Victoria operation. I don't know if you've read that section of the plan, but I always hesitate, and I know this is Dave's show essentially, and I don't want to turn it into a meeting, but Katrin, if you could email me, I'd love to continue this conversation in a one-on-one, some time together on Zoom to learn more. What you're doing sounds so exciting, and we were very purposeful with Victoria 3.0 to craft it around the lands that we're on, the Songhees and Esquimalt homelands, the Indigenous economy, and I'm sure you're well aware of Carol Ann Hilton from the Indigenomics Institute. She was one of our peer reviewers, and I think her vision for growing the Indigenous economy to $100 billion in Canada over the next 5 to 10 years is ambitious. And I think that your company and others in Victoria, Anamiki and others, have a real contribution to make. And so I want, as mayor, to support that and to understand more about what I can do and how we can work together. So if you could just email me, I'm really easy to find. And if you're into having I don't want to say a follow-up meeting, because this isn't supposed to be a meeting, it's supposed to be a show, but that would be awesome.
Okay, that sounds great. I'll email you.
Okay, thanks so much. I'm really happy to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katrin. I appreciate it. Take care. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have your say. Send your questions and comments to themayorhelps.com. They could be included in next week's show. And now, Mayor Lisa Helps sits down with this week's special guest.
This week on The Mayor Helps, we're chatting with Ruth Mojeed from the Inclusion Project and the Victoria Forum. Ruth arrived in Canada right to Victoria from Nigeria in 2015 to attend Royal Roads University. Ruth founded the Inclusion Project and hosted its first conference of more than 170 people in March 30th of last year, 2019. The Inclusion Project focuses on reconciliation, racial equity, gender equity, and youth engagement across business, government, and civil society. Good morning, Ruth. Welcome to The Mayor Helps.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
So it's a pleasure having you on. It's showing up from Nigeria. I got to ask, what are your first thoughts about arriving by plane onto a little island on the west coast of Canada?
First thought would be, I guess, me trying to grapple with what exactly this is. I came tired, really tired, and it was a different world for sure. And I guess some of the assumptions that I had as well, in terms of, I thought, for instance, that Vancouver Island, how different could that be? And so I had that rude awakening when I booked that flight to Vancouver and realized different worlds. But one of the things that really caught my attention was just coming here, being on some of the buses and realizing how nice the drivers were. It was one of the things that threw me off balance. I literally was on the phone calling people back home and going, I'm not sure what's going on here, but this is very different from where I come from. So yeah, definitely a different culture. I mean, going to some banks as well, or some public institutions, and just seeing how orderly things can be. I'm not saying that's not always the case in Nigeria, but just seeing how well thought out some processes were was another area that I was quite taken aback when I got here.
I always find it fascinating how people view and experience coming to Victoria, because I moved here 20 years ago from Toronto, and Toronto is a city of, I guess, about 6 million people now. So it's hustle bustle, and then you come here and some days you feel like you're pretty isolated. I mean, absolutely stunningly beautiful, but you're on an island, there's a smaller population. So I always find it the take that people have from different parts of the world.
Yeah, and if I could add to that too, was the feeling of, I mean, I like to say that I didn't realize how Nigerian I was until I came to Canada, because where I come from, practically everyone looks like me, maybe just a few shades lighter, but everyone looks like me. We are born of similar experiences. There is quite a bit of ethnicity, ethnic differences, diversity there. But it wasn't until I got here that I realized maybe the way I have always known the world to be is quite different. And of course, coming to a new community where 3 out of 5 people you meet on the road do not look anything like you, you really start to crave those things from home and things that are more familiar. But also, I guess for me too, was really from time to time being able to check, why did I come here? Why did I make that leap? Why did I leave the tastes, the cultures, the norms that were quite familiar to me, and just really trying to trudge through all of that and learn myself in a different environment as well.
So how do those experiences shape your decision to found the Inclusion Project?
I mean, looking at this conversation now, I remember meeting Mayor Helps, I would say about 4 years ago now. And at that time, it was me I just had questions as someone who was coming here newly. So I came, like you did mention, came here to take a program at Royal Roads University. Wasn't quite sure what to expect through that program, but it was being in there and getting to meet people whose experiences were very much like mine. I would say in some ways, people who are qualified, who are looking for the next step in terms of their professional progression, and just not finding those opportunities. And it really led me to asking questions. I heard people talk about the accent bias. I heard people talk about like just the fact that I have a name that is different from what employers would recognize. And it was a lot of my classmates at the time trying to get internships, but not just being able to successfully get that because Canadian experience. And so I had all of these questions. Thankfully, at the time, too, the Victoria Foundation had, through Sandra Richardson, had given me an opportunity to be an intern over there, and that really helped me to connect with the community. And that was when I made that first connection to the mayor. I remember the first time in her office where we sat down, and I just came. I'm sure she must have thought, "Who is this unrefined person?" But
I thought, who's this amazing person? That's what I thought.
But yeah, I came with all of these questions as someone who was hearing from that other side and really trying to make sense of what this community is like for me. And then before long, it was expanding that network as well. Spoke with Catherine Holt, who used to be the CEO of the Chamber as well, like trying to understand what the business community around here is like. And then from there went on to start a TV show, just connecting with different stakeholders, again, trying to understand this thing around why we're not able to bridge the gap between the need for talent with the overabundance, if you may, of talent that is lying in the institutions, or people who are here really trying to contribute but just not able to make that step. And so it was in many ways my own experience, but also the learnings and the connections that I made with other people whose stories were very much like mine, but also uniquely different. It was the Inclusion Project started as a product of that. And I have to say, just really, really thankful, feel really blessed to have been part of such a community as this, that embrace that wholly and fully. Because what I realized was, having spoken with these different stakeholders who were practically everyone was saying the same thing. There was not a person who was saying anything other than we need to be more inclusive. Essentially, we need to be more open to what talent recruitment and all of that is like. But nobody really was stepping into that space to say, let's connect everyone. And that's what the Inclusion Project started out as, just that space to connect everyone, to hear from the other side, and to see what opportunities we can find for collaboration and really to move things to the next level. And so that's what March of 2019 was, yeah.
And Ruth, do you think it's making a difference? I mean, the beauty of the Inclusion Project is you came here as an international student, you graduated, you wanted to stay, you wanted to look for work. You heard the stories from so many other of your colleagues and fellow students that they were also here from around the world, wanted to stay, wanted to look for work, encountered racism, cultural bias, all of those things in employers. And is it working? Like, are you seeing some of the success from the networks that you've created through the Inclusion Project, or is it too soon to say?
No, I would say yes, it is working, but there's still quite a ways to go. I think about, in many ways, the opportunity that the COVID-19 pandemic is presenting us. It feels very much like we have this unique chance now to reimagine, to reflect, and to rebuild and see what are we missing, who's not in the room, who's not at the table. But so far, it's been, again, I don't know that I really have met any stakeholder that said, oh, this is something we're not looking to embrace. It's been good, well-intentioned people who just don't know. They just don't know how to move that lever. They don't know who to talk to. And of course, not ignoring the fact that employing someone who is a newcomer, an international student, or someone who's just different, what we would call the other, comes with challenges, if you may, trying to understand the immigration process, the status, and so there is that onus, that responsibility on employers as well to it's sort of a give and take relationship. But what I find is not too many people, even when they say this is something that we should be doing, not too many people find the momentum to take that to the next level and actually do the work.
So what are some of the parallels? I noticed through your website that you focus your energies, at least in part, on the Indigenous community, the First Nations community. So when coming to Canada, did you have any awareness around the government's relationship with the First Nations community? And now that you're here, what are some of the things that you've found, the parallels between the Black experience and the First Nations experience?
Oh my goodness, like coming here definitely did not. And I have to say that for a lot of people like me who came here, it's at best, I would say at the point of entry, whatever initial things we gather around Indigenous people, it's very much, I was talking about othering, it's sort of that sense where we don't understand what's going on here. And sadly for newcomers, there isn't that training or information available to them to know this is the history, but not even just that, what is still currently prevalent and how they can navigate relationships with Indigenous people. So you just find shared struggles, common issues around overcoming cultural biases, systemic racism and things like that, but they are having siloed conversations. And so part of the work that we're doing at the Inclusion Project, I would say very much is around learning what these communities are, around learning what the history of these people are, and really being able to step into that space as well, where we can learn to be vulnerable and to be able to see one another and see what common what solidarities we can find, and then to see what accountability. I mean, I think of myself in one of the things that I want to think that I've grown in over the last little while is in terms of my accountability. And in some ways that's bringing me to also question my legitimacy here. Because I just woke up one day, decided I was going to come from a different planet, from a different world and be part of this whole community, but not having done that work to, maybe it's information, again, that's not readily available to you, but in many ways, I would want to take the responsibility and say, not having done that work to see who are the first peoples in this place? Who are the people what is the history essentially? And if I could do things all over again, that's one place that I would want to start from. To not see my experience here in Canada through the lens, through the eyes of any other settler like me, but to first and foremost be able to go to the people who were first here, on whose lands and unceded territories were doing work and were building relationships and just really living, and to be able to stay accountable and respectful as we carry out our work as well.
So what are some of the things you've determined that we could do better as small businesses? Let's start there. I've got a podcast I run called The Backbone, and we'd like to focus a lot on the interconnectedness between small business and government to try and work together, especially with the COVID thing. This is something that we're going to have to build community, knit those connections together. So for yourself, what are some of the things you see might be helpful in terms of helping the Black community and the First Nations community get more gainful employment and maybe have access to capital to start businesses? What are some of the things you've run across?
I think there are two levels to it. There is the individual level around just being able to shift our mindset around, for instance, I spoke about Canadian experience, which is a major barrier that people like myself would face coming here to Canada, which is essentially, we understand that you haven't lived here long, your resume says that, but we also do expect that for you to fit in, you have to come with certain things that we are more used to, certain things that are more familiar to us. I think that shift in the mindset is something that needs to happen really urgently. And I also think around systemic racism and what that looks like. In many ways, we think of systemic racism, whether for Black people or Indigenous people or other people of color, sometimes we think of these things as something huge. But I think essentially it's when any one of us put ourselves in that place where we're not taking a minute to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, or taking a minute to choose to see them and to see the worth of their experience through their own eyes. As long as we continue to filter things or make assumptions about people, or unconscious biases play out about people based on our own limited experiences at the personal level, at the organizational level, everyone gets to suffer. Everyone gets to suffer because we're not giving ourselves that room to understand what different could potentially look like. And in my experience, different is where the gold is.
Yeah.
In the different, in the what we're not used to, in the what sounds different is how we innovate, and it's how we build together. So so there's got to be that shift. And again, to what I had mentioned before in terms of hiring practices, COVID has given us this unique opportunity to shift, whether it's for women, whether it's for gender diverse people, whether it's for Indigenous or whomever it is, minorities, communities that are struggling in many ways. This is the real time for us to see who is not at our table. And really, as we think to include them as well, to think of that as just letting everyone have the power to be themselves. So it's not you let people in, and then the systems and the structures that are in place just do not allow them. They have to fit into a certain mold or a certain culture. That's not inclusion that will work. As a matter of fact, that is not inclusion at all. So I think, just on those two fronts, those are specific ways that tangible ways that we can move things forward.
Ruth, I have a couple of thoughts. One is this notion of Canadian experience being seen as a valuable asset. Do you think, I guess I'll start by saying I think, but I want to see if you agree that, as the world becomes more global, as we understand the value, and I want to go back to the 2017 Victoria Forum, and to the viewers here, we're going to have another show to talk about the Victoria Forum, but it's essentially, I would say, a larger scale version of the Inclusion Project in some ways. And there was the first one was held in 2017, and a report was issued. And one of the things that the report found on the economic side is that companies that had more diverse workplaces actually made more money, like they were actually more productive. And so I guess my question / comment is that are Canadian employers going to start to see, and we'll just start with Victoria, that actually that maybe Canadian experience isn't the most valuable thing anymore as a starting point, that actually global experience and global fluency is where it's at in terms of navigating the economy of the 21st century. Is global fluency more important, or will it be more important than Canadian experience?
I'll answer that both with the work we do at the Inclusion Project and in some ways with the Victoria Forum as well. With the Inclusion Project, about a year ago, we did this project focusing on the local community, the Greater Victoria region, and focusing on employment. And it was targeted at gender equity, but all of the work that we do takes an intersectional approach. And so we're focusing on gender equity in STEM. And so we're talking to different stakeholder groups. And one of the quotes or expressions that really stuck with me was, in terms of the benefits of diversity, was someone who is a tech guru in the sector was talking about products that are being created are being made for the general populace. And I'm not going to be very articulate about this. He hit that nail like right on the head. But by design, the products and the services that we deliver is what I mean. If you were creating a product that is just for maybe white folks or white men or something, then maybe you just want your employee base to reflect that, or whatever that thinking is. But as you said, in terms of globalization, the world is shifting from that place where we're just having this siloed, narrow view of what the products and the services we're creating should be, or who they should serve. Diversity is not just something that is good, because that's another thing that organizations tend to do. They get to that place where it just becomes a token thing. Diversity is not just something that is good. Diversity impacts everyone. It impacts your bottom line. It impacts the quality of the products that you're able to produce, and to the people that you're able to attract as well. And speaking more directly to the Victoria Forum, so I was not part of organizing the 2017 one, but that one was, it was put together to speak to Canada's role, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and Canada's role in the world around the 150th anniversary. And that, of course, attracted stakeholders from across board, change makers, academia, researchers, just across board. And at the crux of it is, we've gotten past that point where we should be having this monolithic, singular view of the world. The world has become a pluralistic place, and it's up to us. The earlier we caught up to it, the better for all. And that's what Canada's role is shifting to be. And that onus, again, is on each of us as individuals to start to think how we shift what we know the world to be. It is more pluralistic, it is more diverse, and the earlier we got on board that, the better.
Excellent. So now if people want to reach out to you, and if through the Inclusion Project, can you share your web address, please?
It's www.theinclusionproject. I'll say that again. www.theinclusionproject.com.
Great. And so if there are employers that want to seek advice, or if they're looking for employees, do you have, are you creating a hub there that, or what are some of the people that you want to hear from, whether they're business leaders in town or people that maybe have capital to lend to invest in people?
Yeah, a lot of the work we do in partnership. So we leverage like extensive networks, people who do work in these specific areas. I personally was supporting some work within the Greater Victoria region around financial inclusion in the green economy, but looking at how we support women, racial minorities, people, trans people, and just Indigenous people, everyone who's not been part of that conversation in general, in building a more inclusive economy. That's a specialized area of focus for the Community Social Planning Council. We're supporting them on that work. We're doing some, through partnership, we're doing some work outside of Victoria as well, and across the province. So a lot of the work that we do essentially is through partnerships, and we work with private sector organizations, we work with academic institutions, we work with some government agencies, and we work with civil society as well.
Thank you very much for your time, Ruth. I appreciate it. Do you have any other questions, Mayor Helps?
No, Ruth, it's just good to see you. Hopefully we can see each other in person again soon.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Of course.
Thanks for being a part of the Mayor Helps. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks for joining the Mayor Helps on Tundra Media. If you enjoyed the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And visit themayorhelps.com to submit your questions to the show.